And in this channel, we talk about healing and emotional intelligence subjects and how we can use them to create a more fulfilling and abundant life. So the topic of today is how to say no and mean it. Basically, how to say no effectively. But the truth is, we really can't talk about saying no without first talking about boundaries, because the word no is a boundary. So what I'm going to do is in this video, I'm first going to give you what my definition is of a boundary, and then give you one or two examples of how I use them and how I apply them in my day-to-day life. And then at the end, we'll talk about a few tips of how you can say no effectively and hopefully without guilt. So first, my definition of a boundary. So to me, a boundary is all about me, or in this case, about you. So a boundary establishes who you are. It establishes what you like, what you dislike, what is okay for you, what is not okay for you, what is in alignment for you, what is not in alignment for you. It really has nothing to do with the other person or anybody else for that matter. So for example, if my friend likes techno music and I like classical music, that is a boundary, right? The fact that I like classical music is my boundary. The fact that she likes techno music is her boundary. Now, I happen to love techno music, but just for the sake of the example here. So that is a boundary. What I found is that in our society, boundaries are oftentimes used in an attempt to control. The term boundaries really is used in an attempt to control someone else's behavior. So for example, we would say something like, oh, we can't do that, or you cannot do that because you are not respecting my boundary. And what we have to remember is that people are at choice. Everybody has free will. So you can tell someone what they can and cannot do, but they don't have to listen to you, right? So everybody gets to make their own choices. So saying to someone, you cannot do X, Y, or Z because that's not respecting my boundary, it really isn't you establishing your boundary or any really functional way of asserting your boundary. So one way that I would describe, a better way that I would think would be to try and assert or establish your boundary is something that I'm going to share through an example of something that happened to me. So a couple of years ago, I was dating this guy, and he is someone who grew up in an environment where oftentimes when he had a disagreement with another man, it was oftentimes resolved through a physical fight. And that is a boundary for me because of my background. Any sort of form of physical violence is something that makes me very uncomfortable. So that is my boundary. I do not like physical confrontations. I don't like it for myself, and I don't like them for anybody that is around me. However, I cannot impose that on someone else because if I do that, I'm doing exactly what I was describing before, as an attempt to control someone else's behavior. Right, so because that is something that was very normal for him, and I was aware of that, we came up a couple of situations where that was an issue. And there was this particular instance where we were out at a bar and something happened with another man. And he immediately, I could tell by his demeanor that he was ready to have an altercation with this person or to get into a physical fight. Now, that's not something that I am comfortable with. And I actually asked him, I'm like, are you going to fight this man? And he said, no, I'm not going to do that because I know that will upset you, that you don't want me to do that. I said, well, no, I don't want you to do that. His immediate response was like, yeah, I know you're telling me not to do that. And I was like, well, I'm not telling you not to do that. I'm telling you I don't want you to do that because it makes me feel uncomfortable, but you get to choose. So the way that I expressed my boundary was I said, this is what I would like. This is the reason why. This is what makes me feel comfortable. This is what makes me feel uncomfortable. And I ended up by saying, you get to do whatever you want. Now, what I am saying is that really makes me very uncomfortable. And if you're going to have a physical altercation with this person, I'm just going to walk away. Now, that situation is a little bit more of a charged situation, right? Because there was a lot of emotions. And to be honest, I didn't handle it perfectly well because I was actually upset. I wasn't angry, but I was very uncomfortable and I was very nervous because I didn't want that situation to happen. So looking back on it, I probably could have handled that a little bit differently. But the truth of the matter is that I made it very clear to him that I wasn't trying to control what he did and what he didn't do. And that is actually something that came up in our relationship several times after the fact, and that he actually really appreciated, because what he mentioned is that in the past, when he encountered those situations, the women that he was with, that he would have been with, would normally either encourage that behavior or told them he can't do that, or he doesn't get to do that. And he actually did mention that he really appreciated me just saying, you know what, you're a grown man, you get to do whatever you want to do, but this is something that makes me feel uncomfortable, so I'm choosing to remove myself from the situation. So that's an example of how I think we can use boundaries in a more sort of charged situation. But I'm sorry, I just looked at myself on the monitor at a specific angle, and I sort of seemed to look like an elf for some bizarre reason. But anyways, I digress. I lost my train of thought. Anyways, so the next point that I wanted to make, so I just wanted to clarify. So that's how I, in my life, a little bit better now. I have better skills now, and I'm further along in my journey. So it's a little bit easier for me now to establish my boundaries and do it in a way that doesn't feel, at least that my intent is not to control the other person's behavior. It's more about expressing and explaining what my boundary is. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention here is that in order for us to be able to establish, to not only express our boundaries, but recognize what our boundaries are, we actually have to do our own work, right? Because in order for us to know what is okay with us and what isn't, what we like and what we dislike, we really need to understand who we are and get to know ourselves. And that is something that has to be part of our evolutionary journey, right? That is part of our self-development, getting to know what motivates us, what our subconscious patterns and strategies are. As a matter of fact, I do have a program that I developed where it's a very short program that you can use to start tapping into your subconscious, to start getting some understanding of what your subconscious motivations, patterns, and strategies are, but also some of your subconscious gifts and skills that you have that you can use to improve your life and your journey. So if you're interested in that, I will put the link to my website in the description. You can click there and get more information about it. But also, but it's important for you to know what is really an integrity for you. What defines you. And that is actually probably the most succinct definition of boundaries. For some reason, I had a real hard time saying that word. That is the shortest definition of boundaries, which is what defines you. And it could be defined you positively or negatively, from a perspective of positive, meaning this I'm in alignment with, and negative, this I am not in alignment with. But it's really just about understanding who you are and being in integrity with that. And if you want to get more information about integrity, I do have another video. I don't remember what it's called. I think it's called About Integrity, but it has the word integrity in the title. It's in this channel, and you can watch it. And it talks a little bit about how I define integrity and how to know when you're functioning and behaving in integrity versus when you're not. So those are some of, so that's the information on boundaries. Now, as I said in the beginning, the word no is a boundary. And it's a boundary because it's defining something that you are not willing or wanting to do. And I think in our society, we really do have a problem with the word no. Even I, who have generally been fairly comfortable with the word no, there is a lot of shame and guilt that comes associated with that word, specifically if you're using it to say no to a friend or a loved one. So there's a few things that I want to touch on that are important about saying no. And the first thing and the most important thing is something that I've heard, and I wish I could remember where I heard it, but it's a very, very short phrase, and I love it, and it's no is a complete sentence. Meaning that you don't really, at the end of the day, you don't have to give any explanation or justification of why you're saying no to someone. And the only reason I find, and this may not be true for everybody, but in my personal experience, what I find is normally when I feel like I have to give an explanation, it's because I feel guilty or ashamed for saying no, and I'm feeling like I have to justify it somehow. So really, the truth of the matter is that the word no is a complete sentence. So if someone asks you to do something and you don't want to do it, you can say, oh no, or no, thank you. And that brings me to my second point, right? You don't have to be unkind about it. There's a lot of ways that you can say no that are kind and loving ways. So one phrase that I like to use a lot is when someone invites me to something or asks me to do something and I'm really not interested or don't have the time or don't want to, whatever the case may be. Again, referring to point number one, you don't need to justify, you don't need to give an explanation. But number two, if it makes you, if it makes you feel a little bit better, softening up the no, one thing that I tend to do is when someone offers me something or invites me to something, I say, oh, thank you so much for thinking about me, but no, thanks. And that is actually a very easy and simple way of telling the person that you appreciate the fact that they're including you or that you're not trying to be mean or unkind, but you're still saying no. So number 3 and 4 are two things that every single person I know does consistently. I am horrible at this. I am getting better, but I am horrible at this. And number 3 in particular, which is do not apologize. Do not say, oh, I'm sorry, blah, 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 blah. Now, you can. If it makes you feel more comfortable, at least while you're developing this muscle, this skill of saying no, you can. It really isn't a big deal. It's not the end of the world. But I think that the word sorry in our society has a particular connotation as if that we tend to internalize as in you're doing something wrong. And the reason why I say it's important that we try to get away from that is not because there's anything wrong with saying it, but it's because when we use the term sorry, we sort of internalize this idea that we're doing something wrong, and it attaches us to guilt. So I want to try and separate the fact that you're saying no from this emotion of shame or guilt. Because really there is no reason for you to feel guilty for saying no or for asserting your boundary. So number 4 is do not lie. This is also very, very hard to do. But I do think I actually have gotten a lot better at this. I think oftentimes when we want to say no, we tend to lie because it's the easiest way to say, oh no, I don't have, someone invites you to something and you really don't want to go. And you just, the easiest way is to say, oh no, I really can't, I have another engagement, or no, I don't have time to do it, whatever. It's a white lie, and at the end of the day, I don't think it's, the end of the world. However, I think it is important, again, as we're starting to develop this skill of assertiveness and to be able to sort of assert our boundaries, it is important for us that we don't feed that need to justify, or even if that justification is with the truth or with a lie. So what I would say is try not to lie, just say thank you, but no thank you. And I'm looking at my notes so I make sure I don't forget anything. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is you can also ask for some time to think about it. If you're not really sure or you're struggling with giving a quick answer, then you could say, oh, can I please think about it? Can you give me another day or two to think about it? What have you. But then when you do that, please make sure that you remember to get back to the person. I do think it's very important for us as we develop our skills to try to be in integrity. And if we say, give me a couple days to think about it, then I think it's important for us to follow up on that and go back to that person and then provide our answer. And then also, the other thing that I would say is someone is asking you, especially when it comes to a loved one, if they're asking you for a favor or for you to do something and you don't want to do it or you don't feel comfortable doing it or you cannot do it, it's harder, right? Because if it's a loved one, you would definitely feel even more guilty. But what I would suggest is an alternative is when you say no, you can give them another option. So say, for example, a friend of yours says, oh, hey, I'm moving next weekend, can you help me move? And you really don't, and I go through this all the time because I have friends that ask me to help them move all the time. I do not move anybody. I do not move myself. That's why God invented movers. I do not do moving. I used to do that in my 20s. That time has long passed. I don't move myself. I don't move anybody. So I constantly, well, not constantly, but a few times over the last year, I've been asked to help someone move, and my answer is absolute no. But what you can do is you can say, oh no, thank you. That's not something I want to do. But is there something else I can do for you to help you when you move? And, that could be a variety of things. And ideally, you could either ask the person, is there something else I can do for you that would be helpful to you? Or you can propose an option. So if something that one of my exes used to do, actually, is he never moved anybody like me. He didn't move himself, his girlfriend, nobody. But what he did is because he was in a financial position where he could do this, he would offer them money. Say, hey, how much are your movers? I'm willing to chip in $50, $100 here and there, whatever. So he would offer them something in exchange so that he is cooperating and being helpful to them, but in a way that is within his boundaries. Alternatively, you could say, hey, I'm not going to help you move, but once your stuff is in your house, I can come in and help you decorate. Or I can, cook a meal for you, or we can come over to your house for drinks. Whatever the case may be, there are options. You don't have to feel like you have to say yes. And if there's a way that you can say no to this thing, but I can, whatever, please go ahead and use that option. And the last thing that I want to mention is that it's also important to remember to offer the other people the same courtesy that you are asking. So for example, we're talking about how to assert your boundaries in a way that that is easy for you and that people can respect them. But it's also important for us to learn how to respect other people's boundaries. So a practice that I've established over the last year or so is that when I ask friends or whomever, when I ask someone to do something, I always tell them, please do not feel obligated to say yes, and I do not need an explanation. No is a complete answer. Because I want them to feel comfortable evaluating what I'm asking or my request without feeling like that's going to have an impact in our friendship or our relationship, or without feeling pressured to say yes. So I think it's important for us to remember that we offer others the same courtesy that we're asking others to offer us. So with that, actually the one other thing that I wanted to add is that it's important to consider that I understand that last suggestion is not going to work everywhere, right? There are some people that may have an issue with that, but what I want to present or to convey is that someone that you're having a relationship with is someone that is mature and that is, growing and that is a mature adult is actually going to respect that. And if you say no to someone and that person throws a fit or actually reacts negatively to you, I suggest that you really evaluate the dynamics of your relationship because that person is not respecting your boundaries. So it's very important that we are aware of that. And the opposite is also true, right? Like we talked a minute ago, you also want to respect the other person's boundaries. So the one thing that I just want to say is in the comments, I would love to hear when was the last time you found yourself in a situation where you had to assert your boundaries, where you had to say no, or where someone else had to say no to you. And I would love to hear some stories as to how that developed and how you think maybe this video may be helpful for you in the future. Now with that, if you are interested in knowing more about myself or the work that I do, the services that I provide, again, I will put a link to my website in the description of this video. And you can go in at your leisure and take a look at my website. And as always, thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was helpful. And until next time, namaste.